And we're on air. Yay! So welcome to the Midlife Retreat, everybody. This is a place where you can relax, rejuvenate, put your feet up, close the door to the outside world, and just take a little bit of time for yourself, learn something new, meet some new friends. Today I have Tamara with me, Tamara Campbell, and we're going to be talking about loneliness. But before I introduce her, just a few things. Tamara, you and I need to take a couple of deep breaths so we can get in the zone. And Andrew's online, so Andrew can join in as well. So let's all breathe in. And breathe out. And breathe in. And breathe out. Oh, that's the best part of the week. I love doing that. So I'm going to introduce Tamara to you before we start talking. Tamara Campbell is divorced from her husband. She divorced in 2006, and she moved to Scotland to raise her 2 children. She's a natural-born Australian, and for the past 10 years, she's been a single mum on benefits. She's found part-time jobs that fit into the school hours are hard to come by, but somehow Tamara's managed to make it work as best she can. The only problem is that when she emigrated to the UK from her homeland, she left her family and all her friends behind, and making new friends has been a struggle ever since. Tamara says that feelings of isolation and loneliness have been a real suffering for her. So welcome, Tamara. I'm so glad to have you today.
Thank you very much.
And I know that Kevin couldn't make it to talk about technology, modern technology today, but you know what? I think it's just as it's meant to be, and I'm so pleased to have you here today.
No, thanks you. Thank you for having me.
So we met online, didn't we? We met on a Facebook group,
Women Inspiring Women.
Women Inspiring Women. And the thing that I liked about you, you reached out immediately and said, you know, I've got a story to tell, and I think you have a wonderful story to tell. And we've talked a little bit about it. So let's just talk a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about growing up in Australia.
My family, I came from a single parent family. So there was just my mum and my sister and myself. So from a very young age, I had no father figure in my life. And it's ironic actually, because I feel in a lot of cases that it's kind of a deja vu now. And so even despite my hardest efforts not to fall into the same pattern that my mother did, I've ended up as a single mum with 2 girls myself. And we moved around a lot as a result of that. So I think we had quite a nomadic existence in Australia, and we never really had a place to call home for more than a couple of years at a time. And it's funny, having fallen into the habit of being like that, that when I eventually did move out of home, I was very much craving some stability of my own. And I ended up living in a flat where I just stayed for 12 years. And I didn't move around at all after that. And I felt that's something I needed to give myself that had been missing all that time. But the irony is now that, I mean, this is the second time I've lived overseas for a very long period of time, but I find now, having moved to Scotland, I'm doing the same thing with my children as well. So every kind of couple of years, we tend to move house. I haven't found a permanent home here either yet. So it's just really interesting how things can kind of come full circle. And everything I was trying to avoid as a young girl and thought that I would be able to do things better, in lots of ways I haven't, you know. So despite my best efforts not to become my own mother, in some ways I have done.
I think we all in some ways become our parents, either one or the other of them, or we really completely rebel against it.
Definitely,
so, yeah. So what made you move from sunny Oz to cold, wet Scotland?
Well, there was a number of reasons, but basically I was married to a fella from Scotland for 7 years, and we were married together in Australia while we had the children, and we also bought and sold 3 houses in a row, so we crammed quite a lot into a very short period of time. And then when my daughter was diagnosed with like a skull defect, she had to have head surgery. So that was kind of the beginning of the end for our relationship, and it fell apart as a result. So because he was from Scotland, I had to make the decision of whether to raise my children without their father in Australia for the rest of their lives, or whether I should bring them over here where he needed to come back to the UK and they could still be a part of his life and have him support, his support there for the rest of their growing years. So I kind of made the decision when the marriage came to an end to do that. And I really didn't take into account the gravity of the decision that I was making, because I'd lived overseas before and it all happened so quickly. And within a matter of 3 months from the time I asked for the divorce until the time we left Australia and actually arrived in Scotland, it's just 3 months. We sold the house, got rid of everything, and before I knew it, we were here. And so after all the initial excitement was over, it really did hit home, because I realised I'd left all of my family behind. Everyone I had ever known since I'd been a young girl at school. And although I'd lived overseas before for 2 or 3 years at a time, I didn't realise how alone I was really going to be, because all I could think about was what life was going to be like once I got here, and how amazing it would be to be close to Europe and all these amazing places we could travel together. But the reality, it took probably a good 6 to 12 months before it hit me, and then I kind of regretted what I'd done. But by then it was too late.
Too late to change.
It was.
So when is this when you started feeling lonely and isolated, or have you had that feeling before?
It was a different kind of loneliness, because even though I'd always been lonely from as far back as I could remember, it had always been a really big issue in my life. And I was always one of those young children that if you put them in a group of kids, I wouldn't talk with the other children. I was quite happy to go off on my own or read a book or sit in the corner and just be in my own little world. And I found that growing up, a lot of people were really cruel to myself and my sister as well, because we were from a single parent family and there weren't many of those around back then. So unfortunately, I think the loneliness had always kind of set in from a very young age, and the ways that I coped with it when I was a young girl didn't work anymore once you become an adult, because you don't have the same outlets. You can't go and play with toys, or you can't kind of find other ways of dealing with it. You suddenly, people have a different expectation when you're an adult, and particularly when you need to work as well. So I think that I must admit that even though I was married, when the relationship started to break down, it actually made the loneliness worse, because suddenly I was in this relationship thinking that everything should have been 100%, and yet it wasn't. So it made me feel the loneliness even more, because the way I looked at it is that I had everything in place. We owned our own house, we had children, we had pets, we had friends, and I could still feel the loneliness was always lingering in the background. So I must admit that I had done a lot of work on myself personally early on before I met my husband, but it it just reminded me that it's an ongoing process in your life to keep changing and to keep growing, and you'll always reach different stages of your life where you need to work on yourself because you keep changing. And as you reach each stage, say your 20s and then your 30s and then your 40s, you have different expectations of what you should be doing with your life, if that makes sense. And I never thought I would get divorced. So for me at 36, that was a really big shock as well, because I thought that was relatively still young. And in lots of ways, I felt like my life was over. So having to start again was really, really hard. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. Yeah.
And did you ever turn to drink or drug?
Well, unfortunately, I had suffered from depression for as long as I could remember as well. So I started drugs at a very early age, like 13 years of age. And a lot of people in Australia smoke marijuana. So for me, that was my big get out. So whenever I kind of felt uncomfortable in a group, that's where I would head, is for a smoke, and a lot of the people I knew would smoke as well. And then by the time I reached 18, 19, I was drinking very, very heavily. And the depression really only got worse with that. But by the time I hit 25, 26, I must admit that the loneliness and the depression got so bad that I was just walking around all day with this massive heartache in my chest. And so it was hard to even live my everyday life or to get myself to work every day. And so I stopped all the drink and the drugs, actually. And I stopped all the distractions, and I stopped going out completely. And I stopped I stopped using men as a distraction as well, you know, because I used to date a lot.
What else did you do to learn to cope?
Well, I think that when you get to that stage where all of those distractions are gone, you're really just left with yourself and you have nothing else to work with. And I must admit, at that stage, I started psychotherapy, and I went 3 times a week for 3 years. And I sought professional help because I thought this pain in my chest was never going to go away. And when I got to my first session, the fella offered me things that, you know, like antidepressants and stuff. But I decided I didn't want to try any of that because I thought that was just really a continuation of what I'd already been doing and trying to gloss things over. So no, I did it the hard way. And I went through every single session just with a completely open heart. For the first time in my life, I trusted someone to tell them everything, and I just let it all out. So I must admit, from having the time I had children, I haven't touched a single thing in over 12 years now. And it's very rarely that you'll even get me to have a drink of an evening. So I suppose I've gone the whole other way. But I feel better for it.
Exactly. If it works for you, it's great.
Well, it does, you know, it definitely does.
So along your journey, what are the tips you would give for anybody listening today who's feeling lonely?
I think that the first thing you need to do is to stop feeling sorry for yourself, because for the first 5 years I was here, I kind of spoke to a lot of people about what I'd been through, and it didn't help me because all I was doing was really relating a story that they really couldn't connect to anyway. And eventually people just got sick of me feeling sorry for myself, and they didn't want to hear it anymore. And so then you can alienate people through doing that. So once I kind of realized what I was doing, I made a conscious effort to get out and to pursue any each and every hobby I could possibly think of that I had never done before in my entire life before. And I pursued things like photography. I'd done writing. I started blogging, but they were hidden blogs. They weren't necessarily things that I wanted people to read, but they were really cathartic because I was finally able to put my true thoughts on paper. And I started things like poetry and just everything I could get my hands on. And anything that got me out and talking to other people actually was really, really good for me. And then finally I would say that don't sit in the house, don't make excuses for why you cannot go out today, because you are your own worst critic. And I think out of all the people you're ever going to meet, that you will put yourself down more than anyone else ever will. And so don't make up the excuse of saying, I'm too fat to go out today, I'm too ugly, I don't feel well, because all these sorts of things will just hold you back. And you're just making excuses for yourself to not leave the house. The last thing I will say is that a lot of people turn to technology the way that I did, and they were going to like internet dating sites or chat rooms, or they'll meet cyber soulmates online. Now, I had a cyber soulmate, and so every Friday and Saturday night, the first thing I wanted to do is come home and talk to him online. But I had a relationship with my computer. I didn't have a relationship with someone who was out there and real and in person and helping me, you know, get out in the world and see things. So I'm finding that's a recurring theme with a lot of people I'm meeting these days. Is that it's a very easy crux, and that it's a very easy substitute for actually going out and meeting people in person, which is what I think everybody really needs.
And is that why you started the supper club?
It actually is, because there have, for a number of years, there have been dining clubs in Australia, and they are also very successful in the United States. And they're based around people getting out in person and actually going out for a meal with complete strangers. And I've seen this work on a number of occasions, because different places I've worked for have had communal dining tables where you'll go and dine with people from all over the world if you're traveling to a different resort, that type of thing. And it always works extremely well. So I thought, there's got to be something like that here, of course, and in the UK there doesn't seem to be anything that's, you know, the equivalent of that. And I went on a chat site one night, as you do, on Facebook on a Friday night, and I was sitting here on my own, and my kids had gone off to the dance for the weekend, and I thought, oh, I can't spend another Friday night here on my own. I will go absolutely balmy. And I went onto this page in Kilmarnock, and I just said, oh, does anyone know of any over 40s clubs in the area where I can meet people? And, you know, it was all like, oh, no, nothing like that, nothing exists. And I went, bugger it, I'm just going to go and make my own. So I started a group that night on Facebook, and I just called it the Kilmarnock Supper Club, and I went, right. And by the end of the first week, I had 100 members that just joined up, and they'd just seen it, and they'd all seen me mention it on this chat site, and they all just suddenly clicked on, and I suddenly had all these people. And then and then because it happened so quickly, I started comparing the stories, and I'm like, oh, okay, so tell me why you've joined and what you're looking for, and what's your situation. And I mean, there's nurses, and there's empty nesters, there are expats from out of town, there are single men, single women, there are couples where one person's more social than the other in the relationship, all sorts of backgrounds, single dads, single mums, you name it. And so suddenly all these people kind of asking when we were going to meet up for the first time. So I organised a coffee shop, and I had 15 people at the first Saturday.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because, I mean, it was the first time I'd really done anything that brave in such a long time. And I was petrified, let alone anyone else that was going to walk in the door. and it's your own. It's kind of your worst nightmare really, is to go and sit and wait for somebody. You know, it's like a blind date. So yeah, it's all gone from there. So I wouldn't look back now. Quite interesting.
I bet you would have been really frightened if all 100 people had turned up on the first night.
I think the cafe would have been happy though. It would have been an instant party, but yeah. But it just shows that, you know, that I think people now that they've embraced technology, they're realizing there's still something missing there. You know, it's great, it's handy, it's convenient, you don't have to travel, but at the same time, it's keeping people at home now.
And they're not getting out and doing the usual conversation.
No. And I mean, you know, it's great to chat to someone on a webcam, and, you know, and it's really nice to pick up the phone and have a phone call back home, which I still do regularly, but it's still not the same as going out and actually being with people and sharing stories and knowing you've got the entire afternoon, you haven't got some kind of meter ticking in the background.
So tell us some of the fun stories that you had from your supper club.
Well, it's the first time I've ever had a Facebook group. So I would say initially you do not know what kind of people you're going to be getting straight off the bat. We've got people from all different backgrounds, which is fantastic, but not all of them have gelled together. I personally had some people who came into the group that had different objectives from myself. I've had a couple of people join that I thought were only there to advertise themselves or their business. I had a couple of people that were grandstanding and trying to make out that there was something sinister behind it, which there wasn't. I had quite a few local people who were kind of took the attitude of, oh, who do you think you are? Like, you're new to the area, you've come up with this concept and we don't know you, so we're going to give you a hard time. So they didn't last very long, unfortunately. But I must admit that through the whole group, there is an ethos of that everyone is there to become friends, and that is very much a traditional values society for me, because I know how I like to be treated and I'm going to treat people exactly the same way. And if they don't agree with that, then this is the wrong club for them. So everybody's welcome, as long as they come in with an open mind and they know that they're going to be kind to the other members. You need to be generous with the other members. You need to respect them and give them a chance to speak their own story. And, you know, it's not a club for people that don't have any friends. There's no social stigma attached to it. But I am finding that some of the members are still sitting back on the sidelines, very much in the safety of their own lounge room and just sitting back and watching what's going on rather than coming along, which I think is really sad because it means they're missing out. You know, so those of us that do get along each week, we've already made some fantastic friends. And there's people that come religiously every week now, and they're not humongous numbers, but it's always someone different. We've got different nationalities. We've got people there from Australia, people from England. I had one fella driving down from Loch Gilphead, which is 2 hours north in Argyll. We've got people coming over from Troon, Strathen. So I think people have really embraced that kind of idea, and I think they're ready for it.
So do you charge a membership fee?
No, I don't. No, I don't think you should charge anyone for friendship. And there's lots of sites. Some of the girls and I, we've all been on the Match.com, some of the other singles sites that are run locally. They all want money up front. They all want to charge you for having a chat to somebody, or they want to charge you for just looking at a photo. And we have, in addition, kind of compared some of our disaster stories from that. And the problem is with all of these kind of sites is that, you know, they're in it for the money, and they also don't help you beyond that initial introduction. You know, they're not there coming along with you to your first blind date. They're not making sure that you get home safely at the end of the night. There's no accountability. So I wanted to make this membership free to everybody. And all they do is they come along to the events. I don't even want any money changing hands with me. I don't want to deal with any money whatsoever. And they just, when they get to the venue on the night, it's pay as you go. So they RSVP. I have a basic idea of who's coming, and we just tell the restaurant, and then when they get there, everyone pulls the money at the end of the night, and it goes straight to the restaurant, and I don't have to have any part of it. So
fantastic.
Yeah, so that you know, and it has to be affordable, because you're talking people that have sat at home for years and years on their own. They might be on the pension, might only get £70 a week. So the other thing is that I found that a lot of them find the weekends are very, very long. From the time, say, they work in a work situation, and from the time they go home on a Friday afternoon to the next Monday morning, if they don't have family or friends, it's a very, very long time for them to be on their own. And I know that from personal experience. So we meet regularly every Saturday afternoon, and it's £2 per person. And we just meet for coffee, and they pay the restaurant directly, and it's affordable. So you don't need money to socialise. You need money if you want to go for a dinner or a lunch, but you don't need money just to come out and have a wee coffee. You know, it's really quite affordable. And that was the whole idea. So, you know, even if we end up with 500 members someday, it will always operate like that. Yeah.
So what would you say to someone who's feeling lonely, say in the north of England, where Andrew and I are originally from? Andrew still lives in Sheffield. But if you would had somebody in the audience, how would you tell them to start the supper club?
I think the best way is that if they join a few local chat sites like Kilmarnock Chat, for example, that had 5,000 members in it. So it was a good place to kind of test the idea. And I've seen another lady do it in Irvine recently on one of the buy and sell chat sites. And she just got on there and said exactly the same thing. Is there anyone else here who's up for a friendship group? I want to start something in the local area, going out to local restaurants, cafes, that type of thing. And she has so many, she was swamped with responses. And that's kind of 10 miles up the road from here. So I think people are ready for something like this. And I personally have been going through things like local classifieds and stuff, and people are advertising for friendships on classified sites. So I think that people have realised that they're lonely, you know, that there's something missing in their life, and you can't always go to a cooking class or an adult education group, and you don't always find someone you click with. But I think if you're going to something like the supper club, that initial tension's taken away from you, and you know you're going to sit down with someone and have a decent conversation, which you can't do in a cocktail bar or a club or anywhere else. But over a dinner, you know, you're in a safe environment. You're going to meet like-minded people who are there for the same reason that you are. And I would recommend anyone go on to their local Facebook page, start your own group, call it whatever you like, and set up the ethos behind that of how you want it to run. And I mean, it can be a theatre group, or it can be, you know, like a coffee club, or it can be a cheesecake club, or just pick an interest that you're passionate about. And then obviously, you know, market it and join lots of other pages and lots of other groups. And once you've started your group, paste that link to lots of other people and tell them about it and tell them how they can join. And I think the following, that it'll just come, you know, as long as you kind of keep putting the word out there. And I mean, there'll be lots of hits and misses. It's not for everybody. Not everyone will love the idea. I had a little bit of flack there in the beginning, which now it's over and done with. You know, it's not going to be smooth sailing because you're dealing with people. But it's just so rewarding. And it's, you know, the best thing I've done in a really long time. You know, so
you've also been writing a blog, and I loved your last blog where you said that this is what's missing in our lives at the minute, that we're so embroiled in our internet and our internet relationships, and we've a lot of people are beginning to realize that it's time to change and go back to, I call it hugging, because you can't hug on the internet, can you? You know?
No, you don't, and you can't touch hands. You can't put your arm around someone. You don't have that same connection of the eyes across the room, or, you know, there's just so many, it's just so much more rewarding being with people in person. And, you know, you can share so many talents, you know, things that you haven't spoken about for years. And, you know, you might find people in the group that need your expertise or your help with something. And I must admit, with my group, I encourage everyone to swap friend requests afterwards, because once that initial icebreaker is made, and they've met in person, I'm like, okay, swap friend requests now and start up your own conversations, because I'm finding that you never quite, it's like riding a bike, you never quite lose the knack. You might think you have, but you still got a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you never quite lose that knack of getting together and talking to other people. It might take a while. It might take you a few weeks to come out of your shell, but by the time you do, you'll be loving it. It's hilarious, honestly.
Andrew put a little comment. He said, "This is a wonderful story."
Oh, thank you. That's lovely.
Which I think it's really nice.
Yeah, I must say, I just wish I'd done it 10 years ago, because, you know, it would have saved me a lot of heartache. Oh, curry club. See, there you go. See? And see, these are starting to pop up all over the place now. And I mean, people are joining there's sites called We FIFO, where people are starting supper clubs all over the country at the moment. Yeah, see? Curry club. Now, the thing is, the one thing that probably got him out, he went, yep, great, I like food. I like food, and then that will help him to get over those initial nerves, you know, because you don't have to yell over a noisy discotheque, or you don't have to pretend that you're the life of the party and drink yourself away. Yeah, so there's lots of supper clubs popping up all over the place at the moment. It's the new trend.
So if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, they use the Facebook group Hillmanic Supper Club, which is further up on the chat. Mm-hmm. He says, I did send in a question and I haven't looked. I need to go look at
No, that's okay. Well, basically what I did is, because marketing's my background, so this for me also was the first time in ages, because when you have kids, you do forget about everything else except the children, you know. And I think that I went through a massive stage there where I'd lost a lot of my personal confidence. So it's taken me a really long time to get that back. Now, I made the same excuses. I'm too fat to go out. I don't look good in this. I'm not a drinker. I'm not a party animal anymore. And I thought all of those things would stop me from having friends, but they haven't. And there's a lot of girls in the group that don't drink anymore. And the thing is, I think you get to the stage where your body's not really cut out for it anyway. You know, you can't live like that, and you shouldn't live like that for the rest of your life anyway, because it's not good for you. So I just find that the clubs that are popping up now, it just gives people an excuse to talk to others. And you shouldn't really need an excuse, but it's like when people came along the first week, they were wondering whether it was a scam or not. And a lot of them were really quite scared about coming out on their own to meet a complete stranger, even though it was a woman. And they really were very distrusting of the whole process. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been scared into submission these days. And so they think it's safe for them to sit at home and do nothing. Whereas nowadays, I couldn't think of anything worse. I literally couldn't go through another weekend like that ever again. But, you know, it just shows that because now that the group's set up, I friended everyone that sent me a request to join. So suddenly, overnight, I had 100 new friends, which was really nice because I got over my initial nerves and it gave me a purpose to talk to them then. So I've been contacting complete strangers, men, women, you name it, and I'll start the conversation and I'm like, oh, hi, how are you? You know, and, you know, why did you join the club, and what are you looking for, or what's your background, or how many kids you have. And it's incredible just how much people can open up straight away.
We got a big question down at the bottom from Andrew.
Absolutely.
But whilst I scroll, just to say what it is, and just says, what's the age group?
Yeah. Well, ideally, I advertised this as an over 40s group because I felt that this is the age when people struggle to make friends more so than when you're in the younger age groups. But we have had some people join that have been 25, 30. One of them came with her mum, which was really nice. So she was the 25-year-old. I would say the youngest active member at the moment is probably about 39. But if someone contacts me and they're younger than that, I'm happy to have them if they think they'll benefit from it. Because the oldest person I've had in the group is 76 so far. So a very good range of ages there. Everyone's got something to contribute. Everyone's got a life story they want to share. Everyone has family they want to talk about. Some of the ladies in the group have lost their partners. One of them, her partner just passed away in December. So the fact that she was even willing to come out at this earlier stage just shows how brave she really was, because she'd spent 13 years on her own with him, and suddenly a very big part of her life was gone. And she's been terrified, you know, a number of weeks to come along, but she forces herself every single time. She's amazing. And then when she gets there, she relaxes and she has a chance to catch up with people she hasn't met before or seen for a few weeks. And, you know, halfway into it, you can see she's having a great time. So it's doing something that I thought I would never do. And I never thought I'd be a leader again either, a leader of people again. I just thought I was kind of done with that. But these days I'm doing it not as a job, but I'm actually doing it to help people. And it's honestly, I don't get paid a single penny. And it is one of the most rewarding things I've done my whole life, you know. And people are saying all the time that, you know, that it was such a brave thing to do, but it really wasn't, because it is so simple to set up. And when it's the answer's right there in front of us. And it's just taking that first person to put their hand up or reach out and say hi and actually make a point of doing it, and then hammering it home just keep marketing it. I don't give them a chance anyway. And
Can't say no.
Yeah, I've done lots of marketing with it, and I've made the blog and the Pinterest and the Twitter and the Instagram and everything, because all those avenues are important for marketing a product these days, but it's just a way of reaching different groups of people.
So Andrew says he's really excited about the idea of doing one where he is, so he'll need to talk to you separately.
Yes, that would be great.
You have to make friends. You'll have to join your group.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that, honestly. If I would be quite happy for groups to spring out all over the place, because the way that I see it is that eventually we could all meet up at some stage, and if someone travels to another area where there's already a group like that set up, then obviously by the time they get there, they don't have to travel on their own and suddenly find themselves in a town filled with strangers. They could actually just hook up with another member of the supper club, and it's a good way of meeting a local. So I think there could be some really good potential for this.
So we've got a question here from Andrew. It's a little bit off topic as such, but he says, I'm not sure if this is really part of the subject, but what have you to say about the feelings of loneliness and separation which results from being around people who don't see the world the same way as you? Now, Andrew, if you want, we can invite you on screen if you want to chat with us at the same time. So just pop into the chat yes or no, and I can press the button and you can come on screen with us if you want. He's got to write something now. He's gone all shy on us. That's not like Andrew.
Well, you know what? I have been invited out quite a few times when I first came over here, so it wasn't for lack of opportunity. But for one example, I was invited to the races with a group of girls. Most of them were 10 years younger than me. Now, they're really kind to have me along, but I'm not a big drinker. I didn't look fantastic in my party frock when I dressed up, and I wasn't wanting to go out and talk to other men. I wasn't there for that, and I loved the horse races, but I spent all day feeling incredibly isolated from that group. And they were very kind to invite me, but we really did have nothing in common. And I find that's a recurrent theme through some of the friends that I've had and that I've met in the club, that they've had similar days out where they felt very much like a third wheel. And I had one lady who came into the group who said she'd sometimes go out with work colleagues and she had nothing to say. And yet when she came along to one of our events, you couldn't, she sat there talking for hours and hours and hours and really came out of a shell. So I think it's kind of just finding people you feel comfortable with. And you're not going to feel comfortable with everyone. Let's face it.
I think the one person that you need to be really comfortable with is yourself as well. I think if you're really comfortable with who you are, it's very easy to make that decision, and isn't it, in a way? You know that you're not going to be friends with everybody. He says he's accepted the invite, but he can't connect. He's not on the call.
How that works?
Okay. He'll come on. I'm sure he'll come on before we finish. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. It's an important point. If you're really content with yourself, then you can connect with those who resonate with you, and you're quite happy to let those who don't resonate with you
move on,
go their own way, move on.
Well, there have been girls that have come into the group that have been troublemakers, and I do keep an eye on everyone who comes, because I am used to being out with groups. I used to be like a tour guide in Australia. So I'm used to managing awkward situations as they come up. And there have certainly been a few situations where someone's made a snide comment or have promoted their own services to the group, which the others found awkward. There'll always be awkward moments because, let's face it, no one's perfect. But as a whole, no one's ever really clashed. And if there's been like awkward moments, then I've sometimes had to pull people aside, and just have a quiet word with them, and maybe ask what their motives are, or just let them know that it made other people uncomfortable, and then that's kind of been it. I don't think, and I must admit, I know personally I've got a strong personality, and I've got very strong ideas of right and wrong. Not everyone will agree with me as a leader. Not everyone will love me. I'm hoping the majority will, because if they don't, then I'm going to lose them. But I think that if I treat them properly and with respect, then I'll retain, I think the highest majority of the numbers there. And then I don't want it all to be about me. I want it to be about them. I want them to have a chance at hosting a night, or I want them to have a moment where they can lead the group and put in an idea, and then it's their day out. And, and I think that's part of encouraging people to grow as a person as well.
Yeah.
And these are people that are kind of at the stage maybe that I was at 2 and 3 years ago, when I kind of felt worthless, and I felt my life was all about the children, and it was over, and I had nothing else to offer. But for some,
and now look at you.
For some strange reason, I was wrong.
Not wrong at all. It was wonderful news.
Yeah. But
well, I'm sorry, Andrew. I'm going to have to find out from the technicians why I can't get you on screen as well. In theory, I should be able to have 5 of you on screen at once. Because you're still connecting. I'm sorry. So, Andrew, if you look in the chat right at the top, you'll see Tamara's Facebook group. So connect with Tamara on Facebook, and then you can have a chat about setting up groups, setting one up one of yours. I'm sure that would be fabulous.
What I would say is, if someone wants to start a group, there's really not a lot of criteria for it. They need to be a little bit organised, a little bit outgoing, and it does help if you're good with people. But the thing is, if I was to go along to a group like this on my own and someone else was leading, I would be extremely shy. I would be that person sitting in the corner waiting to come out of my shell. But because I'm the leader, I can't afford to be like that. So I push myself through that barrier. But if someone, wants to start another group, I'm more than happy to tell them exactly what I did with mine, because I think that other people will benefit. And I've already been approached by 2 other areas that want to set groups up. And they haven't taken on my model, but they've gone off and done versions of their own that suits their town, because they'll know it better than what I do. And I'll just kind of stay in touch with them and wait and see how they go. And if they need help, I'll step in. That's fine. And but eventually, I would like to see a version of this everywhere. And it doesn't have to be my supper club, but if it brings people together, then fantastic.
Tamara, we're coming up to the end of the hour, and before you leave, I want to ask you some questions related to going on holiday or on a retreat.
Oh, yes.
So they're completely different than our topic. So one-word answers are fine. So my first question is, what is the one thing that stresses you out about going on holiday?
I don't like customs. I don't like going through customs every single time. It stresses me out because I've got the children with me, and I hate being in charge of all those passports.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I find that very stressful, and then having to take off half your clothes and your shoes and all the rest of it. I really don't like that, because I'm always terrified I'll lose a child or I'll lose something important like my money wallet. So
that's a good one. So next question, what is the one thing you always take on holiday?
My children.
That's helpful.
Yeah. They actually don't let me go on holidays without them.
And I'm going to dread what you're going to say to the next question. So what's the one thing you wished you'd left behind?
In Australia or?
No, on holiday. When you go on holiday, what's the one thing you'd wished you'd left behind? I thought you was going to say your children.
One thing I'd left behind. Probably half of my clothing. I always overpack, and I always have really big, heavy suitcases as well as children to juggle. So it makes that getting in and out of taxis so much more stressful.
Yeah.
You know? And plus two, because I don't have a husband to rely on, you know, so I've got to kind of carry it all.
And my next question is, what's the one thing you need to ditch right now, mentally or physically?
Probably half of my possessions. You know how you kind of accumulate all this stuff you really don't need in your life? I keep having these, I must have a thing about hoarding, and I kind of keep like every single drawing that my children have ever done, and then every time I move house, I've got like these masses of stuff to go with me. So like moving every time, I've usually got about 3 truckloads. So I'm about to move house again in the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks. So I would really, really love to get rid of some of that, because to me that represents getting rid of some of my baggage as well. And I find that really cathartic.
I'll send you my decluttering book as a gift.
I'd like that. Thank you.
My next question, what is the one thing you'd love to do which is sensibly selfish? So this is looking after yourself first.
Oh, I'd love to get a massage every 4 to 6 weeks. I used to do that before I had children, and I've stopped. And that helps with everything, your well-being, your circulation, I don't know, the chi and the energies, and that it definitely has a lot to do with, I think, you know, being a healthier person.
So if you can't take a massage, what else do you do now that helps you be sensibly selfish?
I eat chocolate.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's kind of one of my, well, the thing is, I gave up everything else, you see. So that's, to me, food is the one of the greatest joys I have left now. So I do tend to make the most of it. So hence the fact that my love of food has come into the supper club, because then we'll go out, we'll have like these massive indulgent desserts and things. So, and it's fun. We laugh, we take photos of them, and we do reviews of the restaurant when we're done. So it's helping them as well.
Yeah. And my last question is, what's the worst advice you've ever been given about your life?
When the day I turned 16, I left school, and my school counsellor told me that I would never amount to anything. If I left school that day, that was my life over, done with. And I must admit, I bumped into him a number of years later, and I did go on and before I had children, I had an amazing career, and I kind of travelled and was all over the world and stuff. So I took great joy in kind of bumping into him about 15 years later and just telling him about all the places I've been, because he was still living back in my hometown in Foster. So
do me a favor, just so that we've got it, just type in either your blog or your Facebook again, just at the bottom here, so that people can find you. That was really quick. I like this. It's a cut and paste. You're so good
cut
at
and paste. I love it. Anyone can join the group there. You don't have to be from Kilmarnock. We have a lady who's in the group from Saudi Arabia, but she has ties to Kilmarnock. But only about half the group are actually active at this stage. The rest are kind of sitting back and just watching how it runs. And it's either because they want to start one of their own, or no, they're up there. People from all over the place that have joined I've got a couple of members in there that are friends of mine from Australia, one lady from Tasmania. But yeah, there's a fella from the States in there, so it's kind of multinational. But anyone that wants, just that has an interest, because there's not many around that are like this. So yeah, if they think they'll benefit, they're welcome.
Tamara, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the Midlife Retreat. You've been a wonderful guest. I agree, because that's what Andrew's put. You're a delight. Tamara, you're a delight, he says, and I agree with him.
Thank you.
He says he sent you a request to join, so when you finish, hop over to Facebook and let him in there.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for being with us. Next week, I'm talking to a lady who was born in London and has moved back to the Caribbean, where her parents were from. And she's moving into an eco village. So she's building herself her own dome house. And she's coming to tell us about living off the grid and what it's like. So can't wait to have,
Sounds
I've
great.
forgotten the name off the top of my head, my midlife. Where did I put it? Just excuse me when I look at my piece of paper. Julia Porter. So she's going to come and tell us all about baking bread and living in an eco village. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's next Wednesday. Tamara, I'm going to stop the broadcast now. Andrew, thanks for being with us as well. And I'm so looking forward to people picking up the replay. Don't forget, there's all the other replays. This is number 14 in the series. So there's another 13 you can watch. So do join us next week for number 15. And Andrew says it's been great, and thank you to both of us.
Thank you.
So we'll sign off now. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Tamara.
Welcome.
Bye, Andrew.
Bye.